It gives me great pleasure to introduce my friend, Marion McGowan. Marion is a university lecturer, she's a journalist, and she has been a civil rights activist going back many, many years. Marion is going to be joining me every week to anchor our panel discussion on the hot topic of the week. So, Marion, over to you. What was this week's hot topic?
Well, there was an awful lot of choice there, Anna, but I decided, taking everything into account, I wanted to pose a question, and it's around our friend from the Golfgate, your friend and mine, for want of a better word, our Judge Seamus Woulfe. And I've decided to focus on this because when you actually take into account what has been happening in terms of even the stories we've heard this evening about people seeking justice, it really does question, is our system working or not? And I just want to pose three questions in terms of this. One, is his position tenable or untenable? And if it's untenable, why is he still there? And why haven't we got the mechanisms to hold the judiciary to account? We can answer that question when we look at what has been happening in the legislature. I'm suggesting that his position is untenable because he failed to understand his own infringement on the separation of powers of doctrine. Yeah, he's failed to understand that. And it's a doctrine we rely on to interpret and adjudicate in cases before the Supreme Court. He did that by turning up and being cushy and socializing, etc., with politicians. We know that doctrine of separation, yeah, where there's the separation of powers. Is it untenable because he's failed to adhere to the very restrictions on movement he himself wrote? Is it untenable because, as Attorney General, yeah, he actually stopped the 219 Act that would allow judges to be held to account? So why isn't he in the news? He seems to have disappeared from the news. And I know that news changes rapidly in this world. But at the same time, when we're looking at Debenhams workers, and earlier on in June, when Judge Garrett Simon was accused by Breege Smith, she actually said that, well, in his judgment, this judge has put the boot into workers' rights. Okay, so when you're looking at, well, what is the role of the judiciary, what are the roles of judges, and where is the separation there? Is his position tenable or is it untenable? Let me just give you a resume of Seamus Woulfe. He became a barrister in 1987. He was appointed Attorney General by Leo Varadkar to give government legal advice. And within 3 weeks of the formation of the new government, Taoiseach Michael Martin gave him the Supreme Court judge position. He's paid $223,597 plus expenses every year. There is no mechanism for disciplining judges, and this would change if the Judicial Council Act 2019 passed last year, if that had been implemented. But guess what? It hasn't been implemented, as ex-Attorney General Seamus Woulfe was the person charged with getting it up and running, and he prevaricated, stalled, delayed, and stopped it. So there you have a stalling and prevaricating that has actually served to stop us being legally able to hold judges, etc., to account. How terribly convenient, wouldn't you say? Yes. He also, in his career, he blocked Joan Collins, TD, her bill to enshrine public ownership of Irish water in the Constitution by keeping it at committee stage for 3 years. and he claimed he was going to amend it. Well, he actually didn't get around to amending that. So, folks, what that means is that water and access to it is not, there is no public right, and it's not in public ownership now. How very convenient for everybody. But what he also did was, his advice on the Occupied Territories Bill actually allowed Simon Coveney to block it. And he advised the government that an eviction ban during the pandemic would be unconstitutional, and this actually was incorrect and was incorrect advice. And he had several appointments, including legal assessor for the fitness to practice committees of the Irish Medical Council and the Nursing and Midwifery Board of Ireland. And as a junior counsel, you'll like this one, and I think we will all will. He was acted in the Beef Tribunal, and he actually took the Irish government to the European Court of Human Rights because there was a long delay in his professional fees being paid. So he knows how to use the judicial system. So,
Marion, can I hold you there?
Oh, I wonder, maybe you're shutting, Anna.
Because I think I do need to hold you there, because there's just too much information to absorb on this man. And we need to devote an entire programme to him.
But we won't. I don't think so, Anna.
I think you have done a fantastic job in kind of giving us an overview of his career to date. And as you were speaking, I'm saying, why, oh my, why wasn't this brought out on mainstream media in the way that you have done it? And so you asked the question there, is his position tenable? And it's I'm going to put that question now to each of our guests. So, Enda, Marion mentioned there about the water referendum and all of that, and that is an issue that I know is very, very, very dear to your heart. But Enda, the question is Seamus Woulfe's position tenable?
Well, Marion's given a great overview there, and the way it comes with the legal terminology and all of that, simply it is just a classic case of the huge disconnect that these guys have between the ordinary people and that they live in a parallel universe. They have all these rules and regulations, all these agreements and what have you. They flaunt them. They look at them and they snigger at them and they walk away. Don't apply to us. We see it day in and day out. He's just another example. He's a perfect man to be a Supreme Court judge and having become from an AG. He is just typical of what happens as we see it. And the terrible thing about it, Anna, is they fundamentally don't care. There was a time when they would try and hide stuff like that. Nowadays, it seems that they just say, up yours. There's nothing we can do about it. And we continue on down the road, skipping along gilly, and nothing will happen. Terrible, I'm sorry. I'm so cynical about this kind of behaviour.
Well, I suppose, Enda, you have every right to be cynical because, of course, you lost in the Supreme Court yourself, and it was because of that loss in the Supreme Court that you had to take your issue on the discharge of sewage into Lough Foyle. You had to take it to the EU Commission, and of course, you won. Once you got out of Ireland, you won your case in Europe. So you have every right to be cynical. So if I could just move on now to Luke Peter. Luke Peter, what do you think of Seamus Woulfe? Is his position tenable?
Well, I'm not sure. I suppose it is a point that Marion raised. And that I think Breed Smith raised, but in the mainstream media, the only one I saw to raise it was Claire Byrne the other day, where there was all this talk about separation of powers, and no one at all was asking where was the separation of powers below in Clifton when they were all sitting around the top table. Now, what the Dáil obviously is back today, so what I will watch with great interest is I imagine some TD will raise the matter, will attempt to raise it in the House. Be it Alan Kelly or Breed Smith or, anyone like that, and what the reaction from the Ceann Comhairle will be. That will be fascinating to see. If they're told, stop now where you are, you're bordering on dodgy territory. You can't talk about things like that in this house. What will happen then? That'll bring the thing back into the public conversation. There'll be legal disputes, all of that. And I think that's what I'll watch with intent now, is what unfolds in the Dáil chamber in the coming days and weeks on that topic. But I am...
And moving on to you, Mark, you know, you've accompanied the families to the Supreme Court, and what are your views on Woulfe? Do you think his position is tenable?
No. I'm very interested in what the previous speaker said, and I quite agree with him across the board. And I contrast Mr. Woulfe's attitude, and just for him to be able to go to the Court of Human Rights to get his fees, and you contrast this with children being treated the way I've spoken of the two children here tonight. Complete medical negligence, no diagnosis, no treatment. Minister for Health refuses to do absolutely anything for these children. They're going to London, they're paying for it. The families are mentally, emotionally, physically, economically broken, and these people are laughing at us. What I would like to know is exactly what. I want to hear suggestions on what we can do, because we've seen in the last week what happened with Commissioner Hogan. And I think that was, a lot of that was the Mr. Hogan drip fed, of course. A lot of things, it would have probably gone better for him had he come out in the beginning and made a complete apology and given a complete rundown. For whatever reason, he decided he wouldn't. These people now think they're untouchable. But what I'm seeing, Anna, is I'm old enough to remember when people said the church, enough, the scandals came out, the church completely controlled everything, Ireland in every way. Politicians, you're next. Judges, all of you, you're next, because I think people have enough. I really want to know what Marion has to say and the rest of them. What can we do now as a nation to stop these people?
Oh, indeed.
Okay, so that question over to you now, Marion, just to wind up our discussion for this evening.
Well, I actually think that we're looking at a need to have a very clear approach to being able to hold people to account. But when you're at the stage in a country where the very people who are being held to account can actually stop that legislation happening, that's a joke. And actually we need people both in public office and in the judiciary who have a standard which we deserve and we should be able to hold them account to. I think it'll definitely need a whole section on its own to look at what we as people can, where we have redress under law. Happy to publish some stuff on that later on, but I'm very conscious that we're running out of time at the moment. But I take your point, Margaret. They will, it's when people will say, actually, we don't accept this, we're holding you to account, and we will use both pressure to bring this into the light, as well as the laws that are there. It's a drip, slowly by slowly. And I like the way you said, we're coming for you.
There's a tipping point and it's here.
Yeah.
And I think that is a very, very good note on which to end our panel discussion this evening. I'd like to finish up now by thanking each and every one of my guests this evening, Enda, Luke, Peter, Margaret and Marion. I'm sure you would agree they are amazing, inspirational people, who are not holding back in putting their shoulder to the wheel to try and make this a better country. Until we meet again next Wednesday evening at 8 o'clock. Ban today, or have a wonderful week.